Okay, everyone, greetings. This is Tonson Fairmont. This is the Brilliance in Commerce House of Freedom Trust webinar, June 19th, 2019. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. We have a very good audience today. We have a very great presentation with some new material and very interesting topics. You know, you think that eventually we run out of basic ideas, but today there are new ideas, new things being covered, things that have not been covered before, and that answer a lot of questions that Randall's clients have been asking and trust clients need to know about the indenture and the abstract. What makes them concrete? What makes it abstract? So first we'll go into just an overview. For those of you who are new, Brilliance in Commerce is a project of La Verite, which means the truth in French. House of Freedom International Natural Law Trust is the main product. We also help people defeat debts in the United States. If you have credit cards or student loans in the United States, contact us and use our system for probably is #1 in America. We have a 100% success rate for everyone who followed all the instructions and didn't give up. We have lots of other affiliations. Look through our website, you'll see. And we are signatory to the Worldwide Charter for Fair International Commerce. You may look at that as well on our site. Very interesting. It's a great, great, great group. International Business Standards Organization makes Brilliance in Commerce a signatory for the Worldwide Charter for Fair International Commerce. Today being June 19th, 2019, where our next trust webinar will be Wednesday, July 17th. Now that's not counting the private study group that our good friend Dominique Hackett in Santa Barbara conducts, and that will be the week before on July 10th. But July 17th is the one open to the public. Anyone can attend. And our website, for those who don't already have one, we prefer you use an affiliate. If you have an affiliate link, use that. For those who do not have it and are listening by telephone, use houseoffreedomtrust.com with dashes between each of the words. We'll give you that on another screen here. And also for the videos, www.brilliance-videos.com will give you the past webinars. Then a phone number for those who need a phone number, 360-200-7521, rings in the United States. And you want to put your prefix before that from whatever country you're dialing from, 360-200-7521. But actually, help desk tickets are a more efficient way of communicating. So if you ever need to send a question, click on Contact Us. And the main website, house-of-freedom-trust.com. My name is Tonson Fairmont. I'm the founder and member of Board of Advisors, Monaco Management Group, speaker on various offshore investment seminars and radio shows, author of Sovereignty, Consciousness, and Cosmic Renaissance. We call the trust international because it is not subject to the jurisdiction of any particular government, and therefore you could call it sovereign, but we want to keep that word kind of quiet. We don't talk to systemites with words like that. It's just for your information so you understand that it hails from a long tradition of kingdom law, canon law, kings and queens, heads of religions, those who are aware of our divine sovereignty from within. And that is something that I very greatly celebrate. Randall in his high consciousness is embracing, that each of us endowed by however you want to state the origins of our spiritual existence have that within us. And therefore we have the right to go into contract with each other, protect assets, and base our laws on the universal natural law. Common law, you could also say, is a basis for these trusts, but common law has its imperfections. It tries to derive its best principles from natural law. That's why we call these natural law. Randall Hillner is our illustrious speaker and founder Briley of House of Freedom, White Light Unlimited, Trustee One People's Public Trust, creator of International Natural Law Trusts, and a lot of other innovations and, shall we say, special studies. One person wrote in asking, well, is he a lawyer? I would say he most definitely is a lawyer. That doesn't mean an attorney, and it doesn't mean a member of the bar by any means. But anyone who has studied enough law on any topic in common law has the right to refer to themselves as a lawyer. In any case, expert in the type of law of contract law that is really global and is reflected in the Uniform Commercial Code and the right for each individual to enter into contract privately with each other without interference from the government, as long as one is not harming another. Today's topic, the trust indenture, what makes it concrete? The trust abstract, what makes it abstract? Randall, it's all yours.
All righty. Well, thank you very much, and welcome everybody. This is the Townsend and Randall reality show, and today we're going to talk about this great creation that some of you who are our clients have in front of you, and hopefully, and I reiterate that you have literally read the indenture that you have, and you will have the intake and the impetus to take this in your whole being, so that you know that the contract that you have created is something that will serve you and your partner and your children and your close family, network family, way into the future. And it is indeed, even though we call it a trust, because you do have trustees and you really do have to trust them, but it's basically a contract between two parties. One is you are going to create it, and we'll differentiate between that a little bit more when I get my screen notes. But if I don't get my screen notes, then we'll just ad lib for whatever it takes. So in the meantime, Townsend and I have worked together for in the 90s, I think. So it's been a while, and we've gone through lots of travails, and we've created a lot of different things together. And he's been a great partner, and we're doing this to really help anybody that is looking to really step aside from the ordinary adventure of life, and at least as far as your financial picture goes. Now, I'm not going to talk about finances necessarily, but I am going to talk about how to protect any assets or finances that you might have. So that's the beginning gist of it. I'm missing my slides, but I'll take it from there. So what we're going to talk about today is what the indenture is, what makes it concrete. So the indenture is basically, if you have our trust document, you'll see that it's about 12, 13 pages long. And in it states a number of things, and I'll go through that as we go along. But the indenture is has multiple sections to it. We're going to talk about those different sections. And then there's more to it in the middle. And then at the end, there's the abstract. And then the abstract is that part where you take that indenture and you start to work it for yourself, so that you can make it fit your local needs, your local assets, and how to use it to invest, how to set up bank accounts, how to help other people who the beneficiaries might be. And part of that is also the minutes, where it really is what goes into the future. the indenture, and the middle part, the appointments and assignments, and then the abstract is basically that 36 to 40 page trust document, and the minutes, which will go way into the future, hopefully, is what sets it apart from a statutory trust or something that's time bound. So we'll begin with the trust indenture. What's the first part of the indenture? Well, first you have the title, and then you have the names and the authority to do it. In other words, the authority is right there, right in front. It basically says, this is an authorization that I, as a grantor, creator, have intended to create this contract between myself and 2 or 3 trustees, etc. And that gives the authority to begin this whole process. Now, I'm really hoping that everybody that has the indenture has the whole trust document. I mean, we talk about, and I talked to numerous clients, and I have a question, and I said, well, have you looked into the indenture to see how it works for you and what your interpretation of the indenture is, so that I can give you the answer that fits your specific needs. So I hope all of you that have been following me and have had questions with me, we haven't always talked on the phone, but almost all of us, if you are a client, have gotten an email or 2 from me, and we have communicated via email, which is fine too. Sometimes on Skype or on the phone or whatever. So we're all over the place, and I live in the middle of the ocean, in the middle of the universe. So I just take my time and I look out the window and look at the trees flowing and the flowers blooming and say, okay, how can I help my client today or at this minute so that they can get the same relaxation wherever you are. I just talked with a client from Sweden. I didn't talk to him, but we emailed this morning, and we set up a few things so that he can take this whole contract, and he's in Sweden. And we have clients in Canada and Mexico and France and Europe or England, and it works because it's a contract, and the unalienable right to contract has always existed. Yes, some people try to take your ability to contract away, and some people have really promoted to allow you to do that. Now, the U.S. or America, when it began, that's what the Revolutionary War was. They said, I'm sorry, King George, but we're not going to pay tax on your tea, and we're not going to abide by the divine right of kings. We're going to abide by the divine right of the universe and my ability to self-actualize and self-govern. And that's the whole thing about, honor your contract and don't hurt anybody. So that's the basis of all law right there. So then we have the first section. Again, I can't see, somehow I don't have the slides in front of me, but I'll just going to go
Section 1 to 3, authorization and name.
Yeah, no, I have it, but I have it right here, but I don't have the slides, so it's okay. I'll get through it. So then you have the name. What you have to do next is list, or the way I do it anyway, is you have the name and the address and who the trustees are going to be and where it's going to be located at this particular time. Now, the thing about the contract is people say, well, I'm in New Mexico, but I want to go to New Jersey. I say, well, just take it along with you. It's not a problem. So if you move anytime, you can always change. You just change the address. It's like changing your zip code, and you change your address and you go from there. So the location is wherever it is, and it goes wherever you are. And you might you might be, let's say you started in Arizona, but you go to California and then you go to Japan. I have clients that are actually in Japan, and so they can still operate, and they can communicate with their trustees via email or scan or however you want to do that. It's very simple. And the way the technology is today is we really basically, with one punch of a button, you can talk with people on the other side of the world. So that's not a problem. So we have that in the first part. And then you go into the settler, who he is and what he does. So the reason that we want to include this right away is that the first thing you have to realize that as the settler, now, okay, so we're going to set the example that the client is the settler for this example. We're going to run through this scenario. And then he's going to appoint trustees. And what you have to do is, if you're going to create an irrevocable trust, you must not, as the settler, be able to influence or have control over the trustees. Otherwise, you might as well just get a revocable trust that you can get for $100 on the market, on the Zoom or on Google, and you create it, you're the trustee, and you own it. So, I mean, that's good in the sense that it avoids probate, but it really doesn't give you any protection from suit or anything happening to that. So what we do is, in the beginning with the settler, is we set up what the parameters are for what the settler can do and what he can't do, and how he has decided to let these assets be absorbed into the trust, assign the assets into the trust, appoint the trustees, and then who does he want to have as beneficiary. So the beneficiary can be himself, or, and I'm not gender issue here, that's he or she. So you do that. I mean, it's like my green screen here, you know, it's like, it's neutral. But, and this is like the pre-arrangements. And the pre-arrangements is such that, okay, I'm going to do this. My intent is to do this. And I want you, Mr. Trustee, to really take over this asset. Separate me. This is a key word. I want you to separate me from my asset. Now, I'm going to benefit from it, or whoever I'd like to is going to benefit from it, but I have no control over it anymore. So what happens is, once you've set this up and once you've begun this process, then you're going to basically relinquish control, which we'll get to in a little bit. And then what you have to do is you state the intent. Okay, what's the intent that I want to have for this contract? This contract's going to go on at least for a period of time, if not longer. I answered a question this morning from a client, and she said, you know, you said it was like 20. No, this is another example, and I'm not singling that client out. She said, well, you said something about going for 22 or 23 years, and in the document, it really states what it is. And sometimes that changes. It's usually around 21 years. And she said, what happens at the end? And I said, well, the trustees have to gather, and they have to say, okay, what is the grantor still alive? And do we want to continue this trust that holds the assets for the future beneficiaries? Now, 20 years prior, let's say today, you have, you're the grantor, you have two trustees, and you're going to be the only beneficiary, which is fine. So we start there, and then maybe down the road, you've changed your situation, and you have a relationship situation has changed, and you may have children, you may marry into children or family or whatever. And so that will change. And maybe the trustees will also change. Some trustees will not want to do this anymore, and some trustees will not really fit the paradigm that you have set up. And so they may change. And the world is changing all the time. We know that whenever we look in the mirror. So we just go with that. But the stability of this whole contract comes from the initial intent and how we set it up, what we want to do, what we want to do with the assets, and go from there. And then what it can do, how it sets up the intent, but what it can do within that intent. So the intent and purpose, I stated in the contract, it's mostly, okay, so the intent typically is that you want to protect and enhance the assets that you put in to the trust. It may be, could be anything, could be valuable jewelry, could be paintings, could be cash flow, could be stocks and bonds. It doesn't matter what it is. It's you decide that you want to take it out of your name and you want to have it protected beyond your lifespan, if that's your choice. So that's what we do. You have the intent is set, and then this is all written down, and you're going to, in the end, at the end of this 11 pages, you're going to sign your name, and you're going to say, this is my statement here. And it goes from there. Now we're going to talk about what happens with the trustees. And so you've set your intent, you've placed, or you're going to place, you have written, and you get the assets you want to place into the trust ready and prepared to be able to assign it to the trust and to the trustees. Now, the trustees are, it's easy in the sense that anybody can be a trustee as long as you're capable of making a decision. Typically, you got to be at least 21 years old, and you have to be of mental capacity to do that. Yeah, but it also can be a company, or it could be, and now we have with our beautiful new trustee service with Dominique, she has a service that can be offered. So that trustee service could be one of your trustees, and you work together to enhance and keep these assets protected and growing.
Randall, could I comment that as far as I know, we're the only trust organization in the world that provides a choice, that the client has 3 choices, that he or she can either have a friend or associate be trustee, the client himself or herself can be trustee, or have us appoint someone like Dominique as trustee.
Well, that's an excellent point. And you basically covered 10 minutes of my next hourly talk. So thank you for that concise version. That's great. So, but that is really the gist of it. And I would say yes. Most of the time, the client chooses trustees, co-trustees, and wants to just be the manager and the beneficiary. Now, we also have clients that want to have a nominee grantor, and they want to be one of the co-trustees, or sometimes they just want to be their own trustee, and they can do that as long as they're not the beneficiary. So I had a number of older clients that have said, I just want to be the trustee, and I want to take care of this for my grandchildren. And so the children are not even as the beneficiaries. They skip right to the grandchildren, and they can be the trustee for that. And so that it all works. Those three combinations are really all interchangeable. You have to just make the choice before we set up the document that that can happen. So that's all available. And as like if we go down the road, I've set this, help you set it up, and you've got this thing going, and there's minor changes that need to happen. A trustee goes, or you might change your beneficiary. That can all take place, and that's that's the flexible part that we're going to get into later on with the abstract. But right now, we're going to talk about the trusteeship and who can be a trustee, which is basically a combination of the three things we just talked about. And that's how it all works. And as you study your own trust document, which I hope you're doing, along with the trust manual that we have, is you will get the gist. All you need is the gist. You don't need to have the same education and understanding that I do. I'm there to coach. Just talked to somebody this morning about coaching. I'm going to coach you. Don't worry about it. Well, I'm all alone. No, I said, you're not all alone. I'm here, and you can make it all happen. I'll help you do it, and we're going to coach your trustees as well. So sometimes we have multiple conversations, and we set it all up. So, excuse me 1 second. The wind is blowing here, so I'm just closing it down a little bit. So there we are with the trustees. At least one in number, you got to have a trustee. It has to be stated there must be a trustee, otherwise the contract doesn't hold. In other words, any contract needs a second party. And you have to have the party that is willing to make an offer, and you have to have a party that's willing to accept that offer. So that's, in a sense, what the trustee does. And he can do that, and he or she, or a service or whatever. And it all works together. This is a working system. It's alive. It's like your body. It thrives on your ability to have a relationship with people and be able to say, yes, we want to do this, we want to create this, and that's how we're going to do it. It just goes from there. Okay, so one important point is that if you have two trustees, it's important to have either two friends, two people that aren't related to you, or a trustee service, or you can have one friend and one family member. But at least one of those trustees must be unrelated to you. Otherwise, you don't really have separation of assets. You need to have that separation of assets to make this a viable, irrevocable trust. If you don't, then you'll basically just have a revocable trust. And so it's not sacred, and it's not immune to being taken apart. When you create something, and when you're the trustee of it, and when you own it, then there's really no separation of assets. Although revocable trusts are really good in a sense. Sometimes couples, especially in the older generation, is they had a revocable trust with the two people involved, the mother and the father. And when one passed, it became an irrevocable trust, and that person became the trustee to protect those assets for the children, and it went from there. So that's kind of how that works. Authority, the trustees have full authority. This is what you have to surrender to, is that the trustees have total legal ownership of the assets in the trust. And when it's irrevocable, that means that they own it and you can't take it back. Now, you may benefit from it, which is totally okay, but you can't take it out again and just take it back and put it in your own pocket. And why would you want to do that if you're if you want the protection of an irrevocable trust? And that's what we do. And then all the time that I've been doing this, and all the time that Tanzan and I have worked together, never have we seen one of the trusts been violated or taken apart because of a malfunction of the trust. If anything has happened, it's because something in the trust was a liability. And here's another common question I get. That's, oh, I want to put my car into the trust, and I want to put my airplane into the trust. And I say, look, if you have any assets, you do not want to put a liability into the same pocket that you have your assets, because it can be that liability can take away that asset that you have it stored with. So we don't put cars in a trust. If you have a very expensive, valuable car, then create another trust and put that car into its own trust with some other trustees, and then move on. So that's a key important point. And the authority is in the document. When you go through the document and you read about it, you see the trustee authority is written out in a plain insight and explanation. And it's pretty drawn out. And I could read the whole document, but I don't want to do that because I know there are people listening that don't have the document, and I want all of you that do have the document to take time to get to know your own document and to know that it's really separate from yourself. And if once you understand it, you're going to really free up your time of worrying about where your assets are and what they're doing. Doesn't mean you're not going to manage them. It doesn't mean that you won't be corresponding or talking with your trustees, or in fact, you can often, the beneficiaries will have some insight into how you want to manage those assets as well. And that's your whole family. If you choose to have your whole family involved, you can do that. If you choose to keep it really separate, then this is your trust, your contract into the future, and you have a right to take care of that. The guide is basically the trustees look to the trust indenture for how they're going to operate. It's not extensive. What do we got? We have a couple of pages, and that's it. But when you get the understanding of what you're supposed to do as trustee, let's say we're talking now that you're a trustee, is you need to make sure that you understand what you're supposed to do as trustee and how you own it. But I had a client that asked me this morning about, well, I'm not sure I want to have them be my trustee, but he wants to see the indenture. And I said, well, fine, just have him give you a promissory note or a non-disclosure that he won't copy it and he won't take it anywhere. And then he can read it and he can decide that he might want to be a trustee. And once he signs to be a trustee, then he's under the fiduciary responsibility to keep it private and to not take it anywhere, not to share what's happening with the trust with anybody but the other trustee and yourself. And that's what keeps things private. It's like when you working on your own life, you have your privacy. Fortunately, our government still honors the ability to keep your privacy. Yes, there's always those arguments that they can invade it, and especially if you're talking about government and taxing officials, then yes, they want to scrutinize everything. But we also know that you can lift yourself from underneath that scrutiny and keep your private life private. And that's a whole other conversation. Anyway, so we'll go there. Then the powers are numerous. And what it is that we don't say that the trustee has general powers. What we do is we say there are no general powers here, but these are the specific powers that the trustee has. And I don't want to list them. For those of you that have the document, I would really appreciate it if you went through them again and with your trustee and you said, these are the powers. I mean, basically, the trustees and the trust can do anything that you as a normal person would do. So you can invest, you can buy, you can sell, you can enhance, you can delete, something. Often the property is beyond repair. So trustees can say, well, let's just take it down and we'll sell the land, or we'll rebuild, or do something like that. So it's just a matter of deciding what it is you want to do. And a lot of that can be, like we have people, some people are older and all they want to do is they have, like, if something happens to me or when I pass, this is what I would like to see happen with the assets in this trust. And some of them are going towards the family and some of them are not. I just was reading yesterday, the guy thought he was going to be in the will of his mother's estate, and she didn't even bat an eyelash. She's not in it. Of course, he happens to have his own wealth, so it doesn't matter. But the idea is that as grantor or as creator of this and putting your assets in it, you have the right to pass it on. And the unique, wonderful thing about this, about the irrevocable trust, is that there will never be a probate, and there'll never be a tax on passing the assets to the next generation or to the next beneficiaries, because you know why? They've already been assigned to that beneficiary. So it's not going to go anywhere, and it doesn't have to pass through any scrutiny of any government or taxing agency. Now, one important point is I want everybody to understand is that a trust is open to suit, and it is open to sue someone else. So again, we're going back to a liability. Let's say, for the example, that we have a house in the trust as an asset, and the trustees are required, or it's their responsibility, and maybe because you're the manager, they're going to say, okay, Mr. Manager, we need to make sure that this property is kept in a shape, because if something happens, then the rest of the assets in the trust can be open to that liability suit. So a trust can be sued, and that's really an important point to hold. That's why I don't hesitate to allow anybody to put anything that's liable, like a car, to be in a trust.
Just a quick question, Randall. Are we still in section 7 to 13?
I have no idea. I don't have my slides.
No, but it's in your notes.
Oh, I'm on section 12.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. If you can please recite the sections as you go through, that would help.
Oh, sure. Okay.
Thanks.
So that soon be sued was 11.8. Section, the last section we talked about, trustee powers, would have been trustee powers are in section 11. And now I'm going to talk about, quickly on section 12 is basically trustees meeting. So in the early days, sometimes we had clients that just put their assets in trust, and we as trustees took care of the assets, and we sent them a monthly report on the movement or of any of the assets. And then we'll, at least once a year, if not once a month, we would have a trustee meeting, and often the grantor would be there, and we would discuss what was going on, whether they wanted to add anything or take out anything. And it was really great because we were in a Bay Area at the time, and we would have a trustee meeting, and then the clients would they would take us to dinner. So it was a perfect little setup. And in the meantime, as a professional trustee service, then we started to say, okay, every time we have to do something or make some movement or get your signature or get your okay, then we would charge like any other lawyer would do. Say you would charge, or any consultant would charge you on an hourly basis on what it took us to drop maybe new paperwork. We needed to create minutes, so we would do that, and then we would just bill the client, and it'd be minimal. It's a minimal take, and I know that Dominique is working on a per client basis. She and the client work out what she thinks is important, and she is a nominee grantor sometimes. Just, I think it's a flat rate, but it doesn't really matter. The idea is that you and a client, whether it's a trustee or the beneficiary, you work out what's critical for you to put your time and energy, and a lot of it is just time. For me, it's and I love it because it's about relationship for me. It's about talking to the client and getting them to understand that this is not as intense or complicated as you think. It's a pretty basic principle of finance, and having good relationship with your clients and your trustee. That's what I really want to emphasize. Relationship. Okay, trustee meetings, whenever. All the duties, trustee, we're on section 13. And again, this goes back onto the trustees. Trustees must act in the highest intent to observe high standards of conduct. Well, anybody that we would have a contract with, we would hope that they would have a high standard of performing their duty, whatever it is, whatever job. I mean, if you go to get a job, they're going to hold you to a certain standard of performance, and that's what the trustees must do as well. And it's right in the contract. And if the trustees don't like what they see, then they don't sign. Or if you don't think the trustees can stand up to that, you can replace them, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But that's performance. Everybody wants to see that you as a grantor or creator are going to perform on your end as a manager or a guardian, and the trustees will step up to their plate and hold themselves accountable. That's what you want. Whatever it is. We know that in life, everybody wants you to be accountable, all the way from pushing a broom to pushing your pencil across the president's desk. Blah. Anyway, trustee duties. Okay, so in the event that the trustees don't seem to be working well, then there is in the document a protector's agreement. So this is one of the things we kept there from a long time ago, so that if you don't feel the trustees are living up to their duty, then you can appoint a protector, and that person must be unrelated to you and unrelated to the trustees. And you say, dear Mr. Protector, I think Mr. trustee A is not really performing and I'd like you to replace him. And that's how that is kind of a means for you to make sure that when the trustee signs, he's going to see that you have a protector available, and they're going to say, oh, okay, well, if I want my job, I better make sure that I perform. Now, if you happen to have a nominee grantor and you are one of the co-trustees, then you really don't need to have a protector, because it's up to you to make sure that these assets are protected and enhanced. So it's kind of a moot point, but it's always there. And maybe you might want to have a friend always be available, so that if you think maybe the other trustee isn't performing, that they can take a look at that and help you get insight and maybe replace that particular trustee. One of the things that happens is that when there's just two of you as co-trustees, that any decisions that are made by the trustees are unanimous. In other words, you and the other trustee must always say, okay to this, okay to that. If you're the grantor, then you have the ability of the protector. But if you have, let's say you have three trustees, then it just needs to be a majority. So 3 trustees, 2 say yes and 1 says no, that's okay. But when you have 2 trustees, it must be a unanimous decision, and that keeps it really clean. Now, every time that a decision is made or an action is taken, you want to make sure that that's all written down, always. Telephone conversations noted in your logbook. That's the nice thing about having the new phones, is that everything is there. All my conversations are there. The phone, the dialogue is there. If I've created leaving a note but there's always a record. And so oftentimes, like, I have a huge notebook, and every time I talk to somebody or have a new client, the first thing I do is I say, okay, Joe Smith and the day. So every day I have like a diary or a log, like anybody would do. You'd have a log and you say, okay, I did this, did that, did that. It's like a day timer, so to speak, a trust timer. There you go, a trust timer. All right, you Trustenheimer, you, Mr. Trustenheimer, to you. All right, management. Management is anybody you want. You can be the manager or you can appoint managers. It's no problem. And the managers will do a particular job. They say, well, I'm the trustee and I'm the grantor and I'm the trustee, one of the co-trustees. Why do I need to have this? I leave the a manager's agreement in the trust, and I often will leave it blank. And what it is, it's a template for you to appoint a manager for a particular project. But I'm going to get into that on the abstraction, even though I'm getting abstracted here a little bit right now. But we'll go from there. And operating expenses are whatever it takes. However, I really caution anybody working with, if you have the trust checkbook and the trust credit card, as I can't say enough about, do not commingle funds. Do not use the trust funds to buy personal items. Please pay yourself. Just cut a check to yourself for $100 for necessities. Then you put it in your account. Then you go and buy whatever you need to have personally. On the other hand, the trust checkbook and the trust credit card can be used anything that enhances or needs to be done for the trust asset. So just be very diligent about that, please. That's really important. The duration, we talked about how, well, in mine, it's 21 years plus lives in being. Okay, so what does that mean? So what it means is it takes place from now, from 21 years from now, plus any lives in being. So if you're, let's say you're the grantor and you're appointed 2 co-trustees, and that trust document and the assets and that contract takes 21 years. It's going to go for 21 years plus any lives in being at the time of that creation of that document. So if you happen to have grandchildren, it's going to go 21 years plus the lives of those grandchildren. So that trust doesn't have to be reorganized for at least that period of time. Now, always you're going to be working with trustees, and every year or minimally every year, you're going to be updating what's happening, what's going on, what's taking place. Maybe there's new grandchildren, maybe there's great-grandchildren now. So you're going to note that down. Now, at the end of let's say you have, okay, so let's say 21 years, and there's no other lives in being at the moment. So at the end of 21 years, if you want, let's say there's all of a sudden, there are people in your family and you want to keep it going, then at the end of that 21 years, then you and the trustees would say, okay, we're going to take this another 21 years out, and it just goes on from there. So, we're talking about all the Kennedy, Rockefeller, all those trusts are continually updated and continually spread out, and those generations of Kennedys and Rockefellers continually break down and create new trusts depending on how many beneficiaries there are. There are too many beneficiaries, so you break a bunch off and you break another bunch off and you create another one. So that's how it would go into the future. It's pretty simple. Units of beneficial interest, that's Schedule C on the internal trust, and that's where the beneficiaries are listed, and that's how much of the asset base or interest or whatever is earned. So we have $100,000 as an asset base, and it creates 10% a year, and you have 2 beneficiaries, and you want each one to get 5%, then every year they would give it out. Or in our case, what we do is it's discretionary. So the trustees can say, well, I think it's a little slim this year. I think we're going to keep it in. We want to really add to the asset base. So we're going to take that 10%, and they're going to put it back into the principal, and then we add to that, and we keep growing that over and over and over again. And also, the grantor can add to that asset base. Let's say that he has another adventure that somehow was outside of the trust, and it created a significant portion of profit, and he can take that and add it to the asset base of the trust. So it just builds and builds and builds. And some people just set this trust up, and they don't want, they have a memo to the trustees that they would prefer that the beneficiaries are not paid for 2, 3, 4 years because they're doing well enough on their own. And so then the asset base of that trust is grown significantly over a period of time. And as we all know, if we leave the interest alone, then it keeps adding to the whole shebang. We have more pasta sauce at the end of the night. Oh, another thing, one of the things is that the the beneficiary cannot alienate his beneficial interest. In other words, he can't use that to go get a loan, and he can't use that to enhance his portfolio. That he can only get the beneficial interest, and it really doesn't belong to him. And if he tries to do anything where he wants to enhance that, the trustees can say, you know, Mr. Beneficiary, we think we're going to cut you out of here. Or if let's say the beneficiary gets all huffy and says, oh, I'm going to sue the trust, or I'm going to sue the trustees. Well, the trustees have a right to say, well, I'm sorry, Mr. Beneficiary, but we're taking your benefit away, and we're going to take it back to the trust, and we're going to assign it to other beneficiaries. And usually that takes Mr. Beneficiary down a peg, and he says, okay, I'm sorry, let's just continue on. So it's called a spendthrift clause. And there are some people out there that actually write just a spendthrift trust, which is basically it's going out specifically for a purpose to the beneficiaries, and the beneficiaries can't say anything one way or another. All they get to do is receive the benefit, if there is. So, but it keeps any beneficiary from trying to attack the trust and say, this is not working, and I think I want the whole thing. So it sort of helps the whole asset base and the whole protection of the trust document and what the original creator of this trust wants to do. Now, I'm the trust writer, but I'm not the creator. You're the grantor is the creator, or you, the client, is basically the creator of this process, because it's not just a document. I mean, yeah, it's so many pages, but it's your document. It's your asset base, and it's your portfolio, and it's your responsibility. Even though you give that responsibility maybe to the trustees, or if you're a trustee, then you take that responsibility on, the idea is for you to make sure that somebody down the road is going to benefit from this asset, and it's not just going to be turned over to the government or any of that stuff. So, or to the creditors. And oftentimes, this, going back to that spendthrift, is that the creditors can't get the beneficiary's beneficial interest. The trustees can step right up and say, I'm sorry, Mr. Creditor, but that is not something that you can put a lien on. So it's unalienable, and it's bulletproof in that way. And it's an important part of the trust document. So I'm on section 19, ascertainable standard is that they have the discretion to either accumulate or to dispense what comes up through profit in the trust or assets that grow. They can either put it out there or keep it in. So that's the discretionary. Some trusts are written where it's non-discretionary, and like say you have a $100,000 base and it makes 10% a year, that 10% must be distributed to whatever beneficiaries there are. So that's the difference. And so we keep it in. My mentor taught me to always have that discretionary power so that trusteeship stays in a powerful position. Charitable contributions, section 20, or trust by law is able to, whether it's in the system or out of the system, the trust by law can give any amount at any time to any charity. And that's the good thing about the trust is there's no, when you as a person can only give so much per year to whatever you're for charitable donation, but the trust can give 100% of its profit to charity if it so chooses, which is a very powerful process to have, because you're not conditioned or you're not contained by any government dictate or just that. No government dictation on what you can do. Third parties just need to know, third parties must be notified that they're working with a trust and they're not working with you personally. So when you, as manager, you may sign a contract with a party to do a certain thing, and they can only look to the trust. If you sign as manager for the trust, they can only look to the trust for those assets. And that's why as manager and as trustee, you need to be diligent in how you contract and how you conduct your everyday business. And yes, and if you're a trustee, if let's say there's two co-trustees, if one trustee makes a mistake, the other trustee is not held personally liable. So there's a separation there as well. And I mean, it's a pretty unique instrument that you're working with here, and I hope all of you that have it are really insightful and making sure that you really understand what you have in front of you. So, confidentiality, of course, is you're under fiduciary responsibility to not let any of this privacy get out to any third party. And if you do, like if you are a trustee or a manager and you blab in a bar one night, you're perfectly liable for suit because you're under responsibility. It's like a banker. You don't give out information. So that's that. And then there's just an acknowledgement at the end. So when you sign at the end, you have put this in place. And as soon as the trustees sign, then this thing is happening and you're on your way. I'm going to talk about how to start to make that maneuverable and to be flexible in the next section. So here we've just covered the stable part or the concrete side with the indenture. And if you have any questions, please write them down, and we can talk about it after we've gone through the abstraction. Now, we're not getting esoteric here. We're just going to do the trust abstract. So please bear with me. So when you get this trust indenture, you're going to get like a synopsis. The first couple of pages of the abstract is your title and who the creator is and who the trustees are, and then you're going to have the initial. That's a 2-page, 3-page synopsis. Some of you have it. I think some of you don't, but it's just basically the essence or a synopsis of what we just covered in the stable part or the concrete side of the trust document, the indenture. And that's the beginning. And then we have a memorandum, and in the memorandum, that's like a secondary synopsis, and in it, it states the whole thing. Who is everybody, who's doing what, who can do the things that they're set up to do, and it lists the brief synopsis of the trustee powers. and it's a quick review, but it's not in depth. So I really encourage you, even though the abstract is here, I'll only want you to rely on the abstract after you've really studied the indenture and know trustee powers and the whole, what we just talked about on what takes place, what's the intent, what is all this stuff that we just talked about. It's just a brief scenario of what that happens, but this abstract is what basically is going to be used to go to the bank. Oftentimes, all you need is a copy of the abstract to leave with the banker. They may want to see the whole trust document, which is okay to show them, but I would encourage you not to have them take a copy of the whole document. Let's say the document's 40 pages. There's the trust indenture, which we just talked about, which is 12 or 13 pages. You can make a copy of that. That's really important. The banker will want to have maybe a copy of that. Some will, some won't. Some bankers only want to have the abstract, which is fine. And that's a really good thing to have. But so you've made a copy of this abstract. And if you have the document, you should see what I'm talking about. And in it is a memorandum. And then the executive manager's agreement. So if you are the grantor, then you would have a contract that you would sign and the trustees would endorse, and it names you as the manager, and then you would have that as part of the abstract. We're talking probably 8 to 10 pages in the abstract, depending on how I put it together for each particular client. And then the trust certification is where you and the trustees have certified that everything said here is legal and the trustees stand by it. You need to have that banker will want to see that it actually is a real trust and there are somebody that has a fiduciary responsibility that's going to allow them to know that this is real. And depending on whether you're a new client with a bank, you may or may not have to talk more diligently about it. If some clients that have had a long-term relationship with a banker and they walk in with the abstract and the banker says, yeah, no problem, let's just make a copy of the abstract and we'll go from there and we'll sign all the documents. Now, what we've found over in the last few years in particular is that the banker will want at least one trustee, if not both trustees, to sign on the bank card. Now, this can get a little tricky because let's say you and one trustee are in one town and the other trustee is too far away to show up at the bank. So sometimes you coordinate. I've coordinated where Bank of America, and I had the client on the East Coast and I had the trustees on the West Coast, and they had to manipulate each other to go 9 o'clock one place and 3 o'clock at the other place, so that they could sign in the presence of the official banker that this was real. And so we've done it that way. I've had situations where I had a really good banker in Lake Tahoe, and she sent me everything through UPS or FedEx or whatever. And I took it to the notary and I signed it and sent it back to her, and it was fine. She copied all the documents and the bank account was opened that way. It just depends on the bank, which also means that sometimes if you're new and you don't have a relationship with the banker, you may have to go to one or two banks before they say, yeah, we can do this. And so if you're new to this game and you're new to working with a particular bank, you might want to have, if possible, you might want to have one of your trustees with you, and then you and the banker can work out how you coordinate 3 signatures on the account. Well, geez, way back, sometimes I'd walk into Wells Fargo and I would sign as manager. As long as I showed them the trust document and left them a copy, they were happy with that. But then 9/11 happened, and so on and so on. So it's all changed. Maybe it's going to change in the future when we have a different system that's possibly on the horizon. I don't know. We'll see what happens. But if you have any relationship with a banker, then it's not difficult to present yourself, present the document. I'm going to talk briefly about what documents to be able to show the banker, and then, but basically the abstract oftentimes is all you need. So you have the trust certification in it. You have a banking resolution in it, which is a contract between you and the bank. So it stipulates that this trust and these trustees and these people are going to be on this account. It's going to be with a certain bank at a certain branch. And that's just a contract that the banker would probably want to have for sure, and probably will make that a primary contract, because that's a contract with you and the banker within the trust. And then, of course, the banker will present to you and the other trustee his contract on what your contract obligation is when you open the account. So it's like a contract for each one of you. The banker gets yours and you get the bank's. And I have it set up so that once you've established that the bank is going to open this account, that that the checks and the credit cards will be in the name of the trust, with you as manager or you as trustee on the checkbook, and that only one signature is required. So in other words, you don't have to go back and get 2 signatures. You don't have to get both trustees to sign. So you as manager, or one or the other trustees can sign the check. And that allows you, depending if you're a manager or you're a trustee, to hold the checkbook and the card and use it to take care of any trust business at any time. And dead airspace is horrible, and but I think that pretty much covers it. Now, what I haven't done, I think we did a seminar on the minutes, and the minutes is the secondary flexible part of the abstract. And the minutes are definitely a private affair with the trust. So if you do go to the bank, you would take the minutes out, or you would clip the minutes together, and you would say, Mr. Banker, you can look at all of this trust document, but I would ask you not to peer into the minutes. So either clip it together or take them out altogether. And the banker ultimately really shouldn't care what the minutes are. He's depending on this abstract and then possibly the indenture to make sure that he's got what he needs to make his part be legitimate. So he can say, okay, I have this part, and I have this part, and I have the contract of the bank. You've signed this bank statement, bank card, and so I have what I need. I just walked out of a bank last month, and I left him a copy of the indenture and a copy of the abstract, and we were gone. And he just said, just give me the minimal and then you can add to it as you want. And so I've used that for a particular aspect and an asset that I wanted to create and have different beneficiaries. And it wasn't an issue at all. So that's why I want to encourage all of you to really look at the indenture and the aspects of it. Make sure your trustees understand. Have your trustees check out the Zooms that we've done already. Have them read the indenture, and obviously hope all of you have read the manual. It's only 12, 13 pages long, but it gives to you a pretty concise explanation of how to run the trust and how to present it to different people and how to contract with it, etc. So in that two-part document, you have pretty much an education. There was a client this morning and she said, well, I don't know anything. And I said, well, I'm going to coach you, but you're also going to get a substantial trust manual and you're going to get a substantial trust document. And if you just get the gist of that process, then you'll have enough to operate this whole trust process. It's great. Yes, I have a personal account and I have multiple trust accounts with multiple banks, and it works out really well. It allows me to separate one asset from another, and it's allowed me to have relationships with different trustees and allowed me to have relationship with different banks and different bankers. So it's been a very nice experience for me. It's been 30 years. And I'm in the middle of nowhere. So if you're on the mainland, there's plenty of banks around. I can't even swim to the mainland. So I think that's enough insight for now. And please put up your questions. Treat the trust as any kind of business or asset performing experience. It can get loans, it can get funding, it can whatever. That's the protector's job. We talked about it briefly, I think, and the trustor, grantor has the ability to appoint a protector. His sole job is to make sure the trustees are on point. If they go off point, then he can ask the protector to come in and replace that trustee that he no longer trusts. Only if it was assigned to the trust. So if you had a corporate bond or you had any kind of stocks or bonds, if you assign it to the trust, then that could happen. Okay. That's up to you, but I wouldn't see why it would need that necessarily. It depends on your hometown and whether you need a business license to do any kind of consulting. If you're doing private consulting, I would say no. If it's public, then you're going to want to, if you decide to take this trust and do a public thing, then I would encourage you to look at an LLC or a different storefront. In other words, I think we talked about it in one of our Zooms, where you have the storefront, which offers the activity of what you want to endeavor to do, and the trust is the back store or storeroom or whatever you want to call it. So if storefront, and you have a back, you have the kitchen, you have the restaurant, and you have the kitchen. Yeah, there's always that, and we've talked about that often. Appoint new ones. Well, if you've taken consideration of that, then yeah, you could have a successor trustee ready. But if it doesn't happen, it wouldn't take long for you to go out and get another trustee. But yeah, successor trustee would be good to have in place and ready to go. It's very unusual that both trustees would disappear at once, but it could happen. The trustee would be paid. He gets a fee, which is decided upon by the grantor typically, or talked about between the grantor and the two trustees. The grantor placing the assets in will say, I'm willing to pay so much per meeting, so much per hour. And if the trustee has the checkbook and the debit card down, he would make sure under that responsibility that he would just use it to buy things appropriate for the trust. And if he pays himself a fee, then he would make sure that that's recorded. Absolutely. Cut a check or use the debit card. You have the checkbook and the debit card. You use it to buy whatever is necessary for the trust. Probably not. No, it's not. Okay, now, are we talking about beneficiary organization? No. There would be I would suggest that there would be a limit on the time frame for the beneficiary if it's an organization. That would be up to the when you set the whole thing up between you and the trustees and the grantor. You can't. That's the trust law. It's a law against perpetuities, and the perpetuity. The only organization that can be in perpetual motion is like a charity. It's just a law of perpetuities. It's just a law that's written. It says a law against perpetuities. It can't. The trust must be defined with a time limit. So you just do it. You just say, okay, there's a time limit. There's 21 years plus lives in being, or if there's nobody beyond that, then that's it. That's what the law says. I don't know the reasoning behind it. I don't live in Washington, D.C. I would say if it's on a monthly basis, I mean, if it's everyday events, I would say at the end of the month, I would put together a list of what was spent for what particular things and just put it in as a minute. In other words, you could use, I would have you either have, you can, you can have a written statement, or you could be online and just pull your online statements off and store those, or, have those in a file with all your records. Oh, hey, I see myself. I can't hear myself on the computer, though. I mean, the Henderson Trust itself was for that time. If he says that and it was signed by the trustees, then maybe that will fly. But I wouldn't know what would happen if somebody confronted that, one of the beneficiaries. In other words, 350 years is a fair amount of time. I mean, the children or the original couple? I'd say the couple can, but I wouldn't have the children be able to be trustees unless it's their successor trustees. I don't think, I see the question here. I'm just trying to, I would say the couple could be the trustees, but I wouldn't say that the children automatically become the trustees. I'm not sure it's up to me unless it's just because a squall came through and got us all wet. Well, it's your fault. We talked earlier and you got me all turned on, man. Oh, we can do lots of more material too, but I don't know. Sometimes I get to yakking. Well, I can see the, I don't know. I know Jupiter's in the sky. I don't know about Mercury. I can see the questions, but I can't hear anybody. I'm sorry. Yeah. Can we go over the trust accounting sometime? Oh, I think I answered that. Looks pretty cool. Yeah. Abra, star. Yeah, I think I covered that earlier where don't use the trust to pay for your personal stuff. Just cut yourself a check, either as a trustee or a manager, and then cash it in your own account and go buy what you need. Yeah, I do it all online. I mean, almost every one of my accounts is online. Yeah, I can go up to date in the moment and see what I've just spent on any account. No, it's and any accounting for the trust would be just on general accounting principles. Sure. Yes, absolutely. The trust would pay for the accountant. Trust would pay for anything that has to do with the trust business. Um, yeah, first you start by touching bases with you, with BIC. And then once you get that going, then if they feel it's important, then they'll relay any questions you might have to me. And that comes after a certain preliminary step with BIC, and we'll go from there. Depends on the trust and how much money's in there. I would not suggest there's any cap, but I would make it commensurate upon their ability and what they do. If they just, I mean, this is what a number of major organizations got in trouble with in the last couple of months, is that the board of directors just has exorbitant expenses, and they charge it to that organization or the trust. So I would be diligent about what you're doing. Now, if there's millions of dollars in the account, then first of all, you're going to have an accountant probably, and then I still would not go rampant in my paying an exorbitant fee to me as a trustee or to me as a manager. Well, it could be a percentage or it could be an hourly basis. It's totally up to you and the trustees and the grantor, the wishes of the grantor. I mean, if you're running a huge business, it's pretty much, you're going to have multiple managers anyway. Well, on a regular LLC, the trust could be a member of that LLC. But if it's professional, then, I mean, so what I would say is, let's say Dr. Crypto has got an LLC and he could be one of the trustees on the trust, and then that trust could be a member of the LLC. I would have to look, and I'm not going to look at what a North Carolina professional LLC is all about. Yeah, that's what Dr. Crypto would have to do, is take it to investigate the professional process of the LLC in North Carolina. Yeah, that's what I would say. Yeah. Hey, right on, bro. Oh, yes, been there. Beautiful place. It's a hike. Aha. It's 13 miles one way. Up, down, mud, with mud. I took my sister out there and she was devastated. She loved it, but she wanted to get back. And I would welcome everybody to come to Kauai at some point in your life. It's absolutely worth it. Okay, breakfast in Hawaii. Okay, you're buying. Yeah, we both, I guess we'll both have to talk to Zoom and see what happened. I don't know. But you're recording it, right? It says, okay. Well, you get to see me, right? Well, that's you're unfortunate. Yeah. Thank you very much, Tanzan, and thank you, everybody.